A lot of comic book fans will say, why aren't comic books sold in places where people shop like they used to be, in 7-Elevens and Walmarts and things like that? Well, this is a Meijer store in Michigan, similar to a Walmart, and they have a magazine section here. And I want to show in this video that having comic books in places like this isn't necessarily a panacea, or it's not going to fix any problems of kids not being exposed to comic books or not seeing, or new generations not seeing them. As you can see here, this is a crossword puzzle magazine. The cover price is $5.99. That's more than an issue of Amazing Spider-Man costs. I have a Archie Digest here. This is, let's see the price, $9.99. Generally, these are all reprints except for like a news story or two at the beginning. Here's a Mad comic. Again, mostly reprints. And the price on that is $15. Now, a lot of magazines these days are bookazines like this. They're sort of a cross between a book and a magazine, and they tend to be more expensive than your typical magazine. Generally, right now, comic books cost $3.99 to $4.99. That's the price of a standard comic book at a comic book shop. And you're not going to find any magazines, really, that are that cheap. Probably the cheapest will be some of these crossword puzzle magazines, if we can find one. See, that one's $6.49. Let's see what this one costs. $5.99? No, $9.99. Jeez. The cheapest one I was able to find was one of these little handheld, it's really tiny crossword puzzle book, and it is $3.99. You can see this is old, September 2023, and just a little black and white crossword puzzle magazine. That costs as much as an issue of, say, Fantastic Four does these days. The other thing is comics, and these are where the paperback books are. Comic books are sold on a non-returnable basis to comic book shops. So when the order comes through for the comic book shop, that's 100% being bought by a comic book shop. It's non-returnable usually. That's not the case with these magazines. When the magazines are pulled, they're pitched. Any unsold copies. By the way, this is a $5.99 for a tabloid magazine. Printed on newsprint. People are always thinking, why not on newsprint? But the thing is with paperback books, too, any unsold copies are thrown out. You'll notice on mass market paperback books, that little S, that means it's strippable. The S also appears on the inside cover, and on some of them on the back cover as well. That little S indicates they're strippable. So any unsold copies of these books, the vendor will tear off the cover, turn in the cover for credit, and then the inside of the book is pitched. So when comics were available at newsstands, if they were lucky, half of the comics would sell. Half of the issues of, say, Superman would actually sell. Usually it'd be less than that, but say, as a conservative estimate, half of them sell. The other half are thrown out. They tear off the top half of the cover for credit and pitch the rest. They throw them in the trash. That's what would happen to unsold comic books on a rack like this in 2024. It's very wasteful if you're printing up a bunch of issues of Superman and then throwing away half of them. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is comics, when they were on the newsstand. I think Marvel stopped having newsstand distribution around 2013. DC stopped around 2017. Both, for the most part, the issues were $1 more on the newsstand than they were on the direct market because it was simply more expensive. So I remember buying a Marvel comic at a Borders. No, it was a Barnes and Noble. I bought a Marvel comic at Barnes and Noble, and the cover price was $1 more than it would have been at the local comic shop. You can check this out on the Grand Comics database, and some of the later issues, like from the 2000s. I think like around 2010. If you go look, you'll see that the newsstand edition has a different cover price than the direct sale edition, and it's usually more. Now we're going to go in the next aisle over here, and we can see some comics that are being offered. And you have young readers here. So these are comics like people talk about Dogman and so on. This is a Dogman comic by Dave Pilkey. There's a whole bunch of them here. Now this is $9.74 for a hardcover book, so obviously a good bargain. And there's a lot of other things. Some of these are novels. Some of them only look like comics. This is actually a comic book down here. A Spider-Man comic. $9.74 hardcover book. And we get inside here and you can see it's an actual comic book. So this may be something that interests younger readers. There's also a comic that $9.74, which I think was also available in comic book shops. I'm not sure. That cover looks familiar. Now the thing to keep in mind about some of these though is that, like, here's the manga up here. Some of these are actually just reprints. So you may think, well, gee, why can't Marvel and DC put out something like this for $8.99 that's really thick? The thing is, these consist of various chapters that have been reprinted before. Let's see if I can find where it gives a chapter heading. This is My Hero Academia. It'll say like $3.95 or whatever. There we go. $3.60. And usually each chapter is around 13 pages or so. So they're just collections of reprints. So DC has done some compact comics that are in that same format. But, just to keep in mind, if you think you're going to get monthly comics like that, it's not going to happen with original material, I don't think. It would just be, reprints of stuff. So anyways, and there's the coloring books and kids stuff. So kids are still being exposed to Spider-Man and stuff. But it's not in a format that would really be appealing to most collectors. To most comic book collectors anyway, the fans who show up at their local comic shop every Wednesday to get the new releases. One suggestion that might be good is to, instead of having 8 different Batman comics coming out every month, is to have a bookazine, something like this that would have all the new issues of Batman for $14.99, like Batman and Robin, Detective, and so on. The problem is that's not a format that appeals to collectors. Magazines are not something that historically has ever appealed to comic book collectors, really. They kind of even don't view them as real comic books. The standard size comic book is what appeals to the vast majority of collectors. So even if it kind of makes sense to have monthly comic books switch to a bookazine type format like that, which is thicker and is a better value for money, it's not going to appeal to collectors. And that's really, at this point, who Marvel and DC and the rest of the comics publishers out there are trying to appeal to. It's the direct sale market. Throwing their comics out into here, into this wasteland, it might get a few more views from the general public. But like I said, it's kind of wasteful in a way, because all these issues that are unsold are just going to get thrown in the trash. An option, if you want to get cheap comics, of new comics, is to subscribe. I'll have a link in the description below to a blog post that I wrote about the option of subscribing. You can go to DC's website and subscribe to Batman for, it's about $3 per issue is what it works out to in the US. And I think it's even cheaper at on the Marvel website to something like Amazing Spider-Man. So, and that shows up right to your door, and you don't have to worry about going to a comic book shop. So anyways, these are just some of the thoughts that I've had for the people who are saying, gee, comics should be available in places like this, you know, where shoppers are, you know, but it's just not going to happen. There's some kids type things. And the thing is, they're not going to be any cheaper. They're actually going to be more expensive than what you find in a comic book shop. And so it doesn't, you know, don't keep, I think, you know, people are going to keep saying it. You know, you can't stop it. But that's just something I would, you know, inform people of. One, they're going to cost more in a place like this. Two, they might be in a format that isn't a traditional comic book format that's not going to appeal to the vast majority of comic book collectors. And three, at least half of the print run is going to get destroyed. So that's why Marvel and DC, you know, aren't investing in the newsstand market. That's why they are investing in the comic book shop market. So anyways, just something to think about. I thought it was worth doing a video on because I saw some comments in another YouTube video where people were asking some of these things. Gee, why can't comic books be in places where people shop? You know, there's that issue of good housekeeping. How much is it? $3.99 is it? Or $5.99? Yep, $5.99. Still more expensive than a comic book. But anyways, so that's it for me. Thanks for watching.